today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
unmasking the pain, navigating sex addiction and betrayal trauma in relationships.
If you've had a partner that's got this addiction issue, you go out there and find everything you can.
It's becoming evident that triggering our own dopamine can be a form of addiction. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. And today I am with new friend and expert, Cheryl Camarillo at LCSW, who is a certified sex therapist and sex addiction therapist. How are you today, Cheryl?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to be able to give some information to the people that are listening because a topic is really important to me.
It's a great topic, and it's interesting. In our society, we talk a lot about addictions in terms of chemicals and external addictions, but more and more it's becoming evident that triggering our own dopamine can be a form of addiction. I was sitting next to a guy the other day who had something on his phone that clearly could have been addictive, and I've seen him on it many times. We actually had a conversation about it because it's what you do when somebody's a friend. I wouldn't do that to a random stranger on the bus. Hey, So I am curious. How did your heart lead you into this work, Cheryl?
I think there's always been a part of me that feels like there's not enough discussions. Talk about sex is very taboo or secretive on some levels, and then way out there with over too much sharing on the other end. But I really wanted to impact people that maybe were afraid to ask questions or didn't understand how to make a relationship better in terms of their sexual self. And then along the way, I started noticing that more and more people were having difficulty with pornography, and then started noticing more and more issues with emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy, betrayal along the way. And so then I decided, it's interesting. And then it happened to me. My husband had multiple addictions, and he was also addicted to pornography. And, I spent a year waiting for him to decide that he was going to do something about it. And being a therapist, I finally said, I'm just going to go look for the answers. And I found so much information. What I have in common with a lot of the women out there or men that have experienced this is that if you've had a partner that's got this addiction issue, you go out there and find everything you can. They do webinars, podcasts. They look for, anything that's out there that could educate them on how do we make this better? Because when you fall in love with someone, you really do want to stay with that person and you see yourself being with them. But when it doesn't work out or there's this addiction issue coming in between the two of you, it's very unsafe and very sad.
Yeah, so it seems like what led you into this is you had an interest as a therapist already, and then a deep and personal experience with it. And sex addiction or pornography addiction is really, we don't talk about it much. And we live in this funky society where sex is almost so taboo that we leave it to the schools to teach our kids sex education because people are so uncomfortable talking about it. And at the same time, it's everywhere. It's all over social media. It's all over movies and television. And, sex is this huge marketing hook. But we don't talk about the kind of insidious way that objectification of people and immersion into, I guess it's a fantasy land about what sex may be or should be, can actually take away from our intimate relationships. And I think that's the big disconnect is what you just described. Hey, my husband was into this thing and he felt like he was drifting away. And, but he probably didn't even know. He's just out there doing his thing and it's approved by his buddies. They're going off to clubs or doing whatever. I don't know what your husband was doing. I haven't met him, but I've heard a lot of stories like this, and there's just no, I'm not shooting heroin. So what's the problem?
I think one of the things that happens is that, we have a mentality that says it's just pornography and it's okay. And you think everybody does it. That's what I told myself, that I've been dating other men that use pornography once in a while, but when it became something where it crossed over into addiction and it became a focus of his life to the exclusion of other things, well, then it becomes basically a barrier between me and my partner. And it went even further than that, because you have a tendency to have multiple addictions for people. So drinking, eating, shopping, gaming. I can't tell you how many of the men that I work with have gaming issues. And I'll talk with the wives or the partners and get some background information about what they were seeing. And it becomes pretty clear that their partners are people that have difficulty with connection and attachment, and they're just about action and activity, but it's not fulfilling the relationship. So,
well, let's talk a little bit about. Having trouble speaking. Forgive me. Let me try that again. Let's hit this in pieces. All right. I think first, since it is this guy I was talking to, I said to him, "Hey, that could be very addictive," and he looked at me like I was speaking another language. And let's talk about first the addiction, and then how does it start? What is it triggering? And then I'm sort of interested in what's the betrayal that happens in the relationship. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
So let's talk about the addictive side. How is it that looking at images or going to a strip club or whatever can become addictive?
Well, first, I'm going to say that in this day and age, for the multiple men that I've worked with, they didn't start this in their adulthood. It started in their early teens, maybe 5th grade, 6th grade, those younger years. And those are the years your brain is developing. And you start to learn that it feels good when you do something like that, whether, it's what we call pushing the dopamine button, where it feels, life isn't maybe feeling too good. Maybe you feel like you're bullied. Maybe you feel lonely. Maybe your parents aren't paying attention to you. But there's one thing that can definitely make you feel better, and that's figuring out how to self-pleasure and using pornography for that. But it's not just that. It's in video games. They're being taught that that's what you need to be. You need to be, as far as a person, is a hypersexual type of individual. And then even more than that, it's what they're feeding men in terms of this is what it means to be a man, objectifying women and just feeding the lust.
So the pattern is that we see an image and it triggers a dopamine response, a pleasure response. And we see it again and it pleasures a response, and we see it again and it pleasures the response. And from what I've read, this is actually more addictive than taking in Oxycontin or something like that, because we can self-stimulate and because it's internally stimulated.
Well, it's a natural process. People, can self-pleasure. I'll just say masturbation. I'll just use the word. But, that's part of, the way the body's made. And so if nobody teaches you appropriate types of things like, oh, this should be kept private, or this shouldn't be shared on the internet, things like that. There's no rule books out there that are telling kids don't snap selfies and send them to other people.
Let's keep it simple here, though. Let's just, you're in a relationship with somebody, and maybe they started out with dad's magazines or whatever, and they're married and they've moved on to the huge treasure trove of video content that's available. Or maybe they've gotten a hold of one of those games, right? And by the way, folks, in case you're not a video game person, I had an ad show up for a video game that was all busty woman, very scantily clad, who was some kind of warrior, and it was inviting me to come play the video game with her. And I thought and it's very realistic avatar. I thought, wow, how is this any different than pornography? Like it's skirting the line. So you've got this stuff out there, and it seems normal and natural to you. How do you know that you have a problem?
It crosses the line when other things in your life start to fall apart. So you stop hanging out with your friends, or you stop having having a sexual relationship with your partner. You figure out ways to get to work so you can put that kind of stuff on your phone, close your door, use that throughout the day. There's
my friend who I was sitting next to. I'm sitting next to. I've seen him 16 times scrolling through images of young ladies not wearing clothes or scantily clothes while we're listening to someone else. It's incredible. But does that mean that is it just not okay to look at these kinds of images? Or I don't think anyone wants to find themselves on the other side of the line, is what I'm saying.
I guess the men that I work with just go through the day and plan the next time they get to use pornography, or they get to flirt with some woman, or they get to go out in places where they can see women and fantasize about them. And it becomes an obsession to the point of maybe they're not doing as much work as they need to at work. Maybe they start not showing up at the house as often because they're too busy seeking out this alternative sexual pleasure stuff. Maybe they start missing their kids' games and things like that because they want everybody out of the house so that they can, be involved in these kinds of activities. I've seen women explain that I was watching him on the phone all the time. He kept saying he was texting work, but he was really having an affair, or he was really downloading or looking at more pornography. It's that realization that, hey, things are not right, and I don't feel connected to this man that I'm married to or this woman that I'm having a relationship with.
All right, so we're going to move over to the betrayal part. But first, I just want to share, I had a client. I first became aware of this when I had a very young client. I think he was 16 or 17. And he came to me and said, I have a sex addiction. And I said, how do you know? And he said, because when I have sex with my girlfriend, I don't enjoy it because it's not what I'm used to seeing in movies. And the experience he was having in his fantasy, watching movies which created situations that were far from normal and that many people wouldn't agree to, though some people would, were just so outside of his real experience of sex that actual sex with his girlfriend was like flat seltzer for him compared to that. So the obsession, the addiction was so potent and so powerful. And this is a 17-year-old guy that sex with his girlfriend just didn't work. I'm just imagining how she must have felt, where he's asking her to do things that are strange and alien to her because of what he's been watching. And she's like, I'm not so sure about that. And he's disappointed and he's unhappy. So that's a very extreme example of betrayal. Let's talk some more about what's wrong. So you're having sex with an AI. So you're watching pornography. So you're not having sex with another person. Why is this a betrayal of your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, whatever?
I think part of it is just coming to the realization that this is such a strong problem that it's starting to affect not just you, but your family as well. For me, when I realized how bad it was, my husband was spending hours every day online, and it came down to me having my child ask me, why does he watch those women? And that was kind of my line, is you are not... Even if it was an accident, I'm not going to condone that. You need to move out. So I had a separation, and I was waiting for him to decide that he wanted to change this behavior. But for me, it was embarrassing. What if other people find out about this? It's having nightmares. What did I get myself into? My marriage was pretty new. It was 2 years. It was about 2 years long. And I just kept thinking, how did I end up here? You get depressed, you get anxious, you start thinking, well, I'll never look like the people that he's watching online. I'll never be able to do the things that he thinks he really needs. And the other side of that is he's not going to think about my needs because he's too busy thinking about his needs. Self-pleasure is more important to him than the couple intimacy.
Than the connection, right? The betrayal is the pulling away from the connection, the withdrawal of intimacy. It's this insidious pulling out the safety rug from the relationship. So one person may be pleasuring themselves, or they may be engaged in like this dopamine trigger and this physical experience, but it's actually, they're actually withdrawing emotionally from their partnership, to the point where, in your case, your child is saying, "Hey, what's up with this?" Right? Children notice it. I have a friend actually who went through this, and his wife called him out on it. And apparently the dopamine hit is so intense that he was prescribed medication to help him withdraw from the pornography addiction while he had counseling. It's very similar to depression, where sometimes your psychiatrist will prescribe a medication to remind the brain what it's like to have pleasure in the case of depression. In this case, it's more, it's like coming down off of heroin or cocaine or something. And it's like, you don't want the withdrawal to be too intense, because you might become depressed.
Yeah. I mean, these people that have this type of addiction, it takes 1 to 5 years for recovery, even in the relationship. So you have to work a recovery for yourself to be able to figure out, how do I replace that dopamine hit with something else? And it's never going to be as good as the dopamine hit that you got from the sexual stuff. So it's going to take retraining your brain, getting a new neural pathway. I love the brain stuff. I'm a brain hacker, and that's what the men that I work with and their partners that I work with, I'll try to make sure that they learn as many things as they can to change up that brain chemistry.
Brain chemistry, neural networks. Yeah, I love that you're referencing that. We talk a lot in this podcast about how people shame themselves because they can't just change a feeling or change a thought like that. And I love that you're bringing this up, because emotions and thoughts, we have these brains that we process them physically in different parts of our bodies. We process them in our brain, and creating new pathways takes time.
Exactly. It's not an overnight process, and it's really difficult for the women that I work with, because they'll watch their husbands or partners feel relieved of the guilt and the shame that happened because of what they were involved in. But now the woman is left with nothing, just a lot of anger and a lot of frustration and a lot of, how could you take away from me? Now I don't know what trust or truth is from you. I don't know. I don't think you even think about me, and how this kind of behavior would affect me. There's just so many different layers that affect the whole connection and intimacy factor. So I can't be vulnerable with you, because you're gonna lie to me to my face.
And I'm curious, clearly, if when one partner has a pornography addiction or a sex addiction or whatever going on, and sometimes it can manifest as, we've been talking about pornography. I've brought in AI because it's kind of interesting to me that there's now AI programs designed to interact with you in this way. But this could show up as hiring prostitutes. It could show up as, but the addiction all happens chemically on the same plane. It's really kind of interesting. And I think the sense of betrayal, it might feel more intense if your partner is having sex with other people, physical sex with other people, but it probably isn't that much more intense, because it's really the withdrawal of emotion and intimacy. That was all a big lead into, if you are in the position of having someone like this in your life, someone who is helpless in some way or challenged in this way, what kind of help can you seek?
So the most helpful is to make sure that you find other people that you can be around that can hear you. When you're in this kind of situation as the partner of someone with this kind of addiction, you shut down and you think that nobody wants to hear this kind of problem, or they are going to see you as weak. So being able to maybe find a coach or a therapist. I'm a therapist. Maybe someone that's a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, or an APSAT, the coaching specialist in sex therapy. Those are helpful. If you can't do that, then, it helps to go to some of these S-Anon meetings, which is Sex Addiction Anonymous meetings. There's so much stuff online, Daring Ventures, Seeking Integrity. They all have podcasts that they, try to educate more on, and have been some of the mentors that I've looked at for my own, trainings, which is why I think I'm such a good person at doing what I do. So
Yeah, I love that. There's a whole array of ways that you can connect in, because I'm sure that anyone who is in the position of having someone in their life that has withdrawn emotionally because they're busy getting that dopamine hit, however they're doing it, that there is a sense of isolation. I'm sure there's a sense of shame and not enough that comes up. Like, why aren't I enough? That he or she isn't interested in me. They're interested in video. They're interested in other people. They're interested, or they're obsessed with something else. And the fastest way to break shame is to talk about it with other people who have been through similar experiences or who understand it. And so did you call it? I didn't even know where there's a 12-step program for people in this position. What's it called?
Yeah, it's like Al-Anon, the families that need support with a person that has maybe alcohol addiction. They have S-Anon. So yeah, Sex Addiction Anonymous.
Yeah, Sex Addiction Anonymous. So you can probably Google that, and you're gonna get a lot of stuff. Anytime you Google addiction, you get a lot of sponsored ads. But if you find the actual program, they probably have online meetings. And yeah, you want to work with someone one-to-one. Cheryl, you're obviously very experienced and deep in this area. How can people find you?
They can go to my website, CherylCamarillo.com. CherylCamarillo. But I do want to say, I can work with you on the crisis. I can work with you on stabilization. I love to see couples return back to a healthier place. The communication improves, the problem solving improves. You feel like your best friend has come back.
And we will have that in the notes. Cheryl, the question I ask everyone at the end of the show, and sadly we are there, is what is the legacy you want to leave behind?
I really want to believe that people are not ashamed of their sexuality and that people find healthier ways to make connections with other people. And even bigger than that, it's the families. You know, if you can take care of this, you can make healthier families. And that's what I'm all about. I don't like to see the suffering. I don't like to know that children are watching their parents get divorced over these kinds of things, or, you know, their dad doesn't pay attention to them, things like that. This is impacting the future, impacting the now, impacts the past. So I really am about changing this problem.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you.